So good to see y'all and be here tonight. We're fortunate that the weather permitted us to be here. I'm definitely grateful for that. I'm also grateful for our team members that are here as well, scrambling to get these things together and improvising. So definitely want to say thank you to you guys. And tonight, the message that I want to bring is called The Lion, the Lamb, and the Person in Recovery. You see, one of the elders here who doesn't have a background in recovery, but believes in God's heart for all people, asked me, and this is the one who helped bring out the vision for the awakening out of me, and he's responsible for behind the scenes and getting this started. But he asked me when I was going through some difficult times, he said, Troy, I'm just curious, what keeps you sober? And it was a question that I wasn't expecting coming from, especially coming from him. And I was like, the cross. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, the cross, not just what Jesus does for me, but what Jesus did to me. And if you ask different people what keeps them sober, it might be the promises. It might be they want a different way of life. It might be that they hit rock bottom and they knew that they had to do something different because for them to keep doing what they were doing and getting what they continued to got just didn't work anymore. And then they were desperate, right? They received that gift of desperation to wanting to change. And so that might be, what got them started. But when you ask me, what keeps me sober, I have to be true to my own experience and my own journey, ultimately true to the Lord. You see, that song, if you could play one song, Troy, what keeps you sober? I would play that song. I chose it tonight because it's my desire that the Lamb that you see gets the reward of his suffering, starting with me. And what that really means is I came to a place where my relationship with Jesus needed to be bigger than my recovery. Because recovery is great. It can restore me to sanity. I can begin to function and do things that I couldn't do when my mental state of being was damaged or restricted due to my addiction. But Jesus has so much more for us. And I say that because I didn't grow up in church. My entire life growing up, my grandmother had a heroin addiction. My mom had an alcohol problem. And then when I was a teenager, my mom got custody of me again. I smoked weed with my parents, right? Up until I had an experience while high on ecstasy. You see, my journey into a relationship with Jesus actually came at the result of a bad trip on ecstasy. And I knew that I didn't know God. If I died in that moment, my future would be questionable at best, and I didn't want it to stay like that. And so I asked Jesus, if you're real, show yourself to me, right? And 3 weeks later, I had a dream where he visited me himself. If you want to know the details, I'd be happy to share it with you at another time. But it was powerful because the experience I had with him physically knocked the breath out of my body, and then I woke up, and the room was filled with God's presence, right? And so I began to read Revelation, and I realized that the person who met me in the dream matched the person who's described in the book of Revelation. Keep in mind, I didn't grow up in church, taught to believe of who he was. And so I had an experience, and then when I decided to read Revelation, it matched. And that convinced me that he is real. That helped me to start my recovery journey and begin my relationship with Jesus. But if you're asking me what keeps you sober, then I'd have to say it's the Lamb. And I want to, if we'll go back for a second, it's, the Lion, the Lamb, and the Person in Recovery. And so I would like to say the Lion who reigns as king carries the heart of the Lamb who redeems, calling us to a life of grace-fueled obedience. And that is the focus of what I'm going to say through the entirety of this message. But when you see in this next verse where Revelation, this highly questioned book that you'll see, there was a moment where he was visited, I guess, by an angel, the author, and he showed him humanity. And then he says, who is worthy to open the scroll? It says he began to weep bitterly because no one was found worthy to open the scroll and read it. And I just want to ask, have you ever had moments where you just weep bitterly? Maybe as a result of what's happened to you. Maybe as the result of what situation you found yourself in. Maybe as a result of feeling hopeless and slipping into a state of despair, thinking that you're without a future and without a hope. You see, the Apostle John, for different reasons, saw humanity, saw their state of the condition that they were in, and began to weep bitterly because it was as if there was no hope, there was no answer for their circumstances. And then one of the elders said to him in the vision that he had, "Stop weeping. Look, the Lion of the tribe of Judah has won the victory." Right? So he says, he's told about a lion. But then he says, "Then I turned and saw a lamb that looked as if it had been slaughtered, standing before the throne, alive and victorious." So this lion figure that he hears about turns out to be a lamb that was slain. And this is powerful because it captures the essence of God, the heart of within his own being, how he exercises his authority and rulership. Many of us have had problems with authority. Perhaps because we didn't have a healthy expression of what authority looked like. Perhaps we had the presence of abusive authorities, and it makes it difficult for us to submit and walk in the authority that we're called to be, but also submit to the authority structures that are a part of all society. You won't find one place that you'll go that's an established organization that lacks authority, right? And so this here captures the heart of God. And so when I was in that state, because I was in a crisis, I put myself in a mental hospital because I felt like I lost my mind. And my friends said, "Troy, I think you're crazy." They thought that you had a bad trip that you're never going to escape from. Like you're stuck in that state of mind. And I'm like, no, I had a real experience. I know that what happened was real. It wasn't just a bad experience on drugs, right? I was weeping bitterly because I realized the height of my own rebellion and confusion of who I was. And I was desperate for him to save me and set me free. But as a result of that, I wanted to be perfect. I never wanted to disobey God. I never wanted to disappoint him. I wanted to do everything he asked me. And I made promises to him that I would never do this and I would never do this. And my sense of peace was wrapped around how well I obey. Right? And I literally thought I'll go the whole day without sinning or without, doing something that I knew better in. And when my day went well like that, I felt like I was on top of the world. But when I slipped in and done something foolish or maybe had a setback and smoked weed again, it was like I felt totally undone. I felt like the love of God had left me. I felt like I had disappointed him and that he didn't believe I was sincere in my faith, and so he wasn't going to take me seriously, right? And so there's this crisis that I was in. And I realized that when you read the Bible through crisis, you're drawn through to the dramatic situations that are in there, right? And so what I needed to do and what we need to do is to get beyond our crisis. And what I did next was I started reading the Bible according to all the things that we're told to do. Literally, I would underline it, do this, do this, do this. Even in the New Testament, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And so now I'm reading the Bible around my performance and what needs to change and what needs to go. And that eventually led me to a state of despair because I feel like there's always something I do and God's just disappointed with me. And eventually I began to see as I got beyond it. And I didn't just read in the middle of my crisis looking for a word from God to help me. And I didn't just stop and say, okay, now I need to read in terms of my behavior and find out what needs to change. I just need to read it slow. Maybe read the Bible, like say a book in the New Testament. How about in one sitting, read it from open to close? and just let it speak to me, right? So I get outside of my crisis, I get outside of myself and say, God, reveal yourself for who you truly are. And when I did that, suddenly I began to see this picture emerge that I would say is the pattern that you'll find from the beginning to end. It's the pattern of the kingdom of God that Jesus came to establish. And that pattern is basically, go to the next one. There's several ways I'm saying the same thing here, and I did this on purpose. You always see what God did first before you're told what we do, right? We do things based on who we are, right? But it starts with what God did. It's God's gift to us. Before we even thought about it, before we even deserved it, he gave us a gift of himself, of salvation, of a new identity. And then there is our response. You see, our response is attached to it, but our response comes after we experience and receive God's gift. There's God's love that he displayed and revealed through the person of Jesus. And he opened up an inheritance for all of sons and daughters to step into and receive. But after that, there's how we then experience it and love him back, right? And then there's who you are, or like who God says we are. And from that flows how we then live. And then there's, what we do as a result or because of what God says. So God says something about you. You hear it, you receive it, you agree with it. And then what flows from that is what you do because of it. You've got what God has done. And then as a response to that is how we shine. And lastly, you've got God's story that existed and was being written on the earth before we even stepped foot on it. And then we then take part, our story intersects with his story, right? And you see this from beginning to end. Even in the very beginning, in the Old Testament, there's always grace. There's always blessings. There's always God's gift to us as to his people. And then from that, he expects some things, but he expects those things based on the prior things that he's committed to and shown us. And this changed everything for me. This whole paradigm changed how I read the Bible, right? So I don't read the Bible based in a crisis, desperate for an answer that God will help me out in the moment, although he is able to do that. I don't read the Bible based on how I should now live differently, although, that has its place. And I have a confession. I used to read the Bible based on what I thought other people should be doing. And how many of you know that's a quick recipe for frustration? Because we have no control over other people. And the more we marinate on what people should and shouldn't be doing, the more discouraged, the more disappointed, and the more we will just feel like, gosh, I can't have peace, right? We'd be struggling enough to do it in our own life, but in our pain, we look to what other people should do to change so that it can make it easy on us instead of increasing our pain threshold, our ability to go through hard times and not get emotionally disrupted. Because the stronger your emotional threshold is for pain, the more you will have the ability to go through storms, to go through disappointments and setbacks and keep moving forward, right? Not to say that you'll get to a place where you don't feel pain, but your ability to trust God through the process will increase. And so there are 3 passages that I want to say that just because I need to show you this, because I can tell you this and then you'll just go right back to the tendencies probably like I had, right? So you need to see this for yourself. And this really is the heart of what makes us unique as a recovery ministry, is because we absolutely wholeheartedly believe in the grace of God. And we believe that when people experience it for what it is, it has there's almost like no choice we have to, but to just be transformed by it. And that's what makes all the difference. So we'll start in the book of Romans, right? Before we're ever even told anything, we see what God did. It says that we're God's friends, right? We once were enemies, and through the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, he made peace. You could say there was a truce that was called, and he turned enemies into friends, right? So he's no longer angry or opposed to us. We're now friends. And even beyond that, we now have a part in God's family, right? So he calls us sons and daughters. So we're not just friends, but we're family, right? And we need to experience that family, that sense of belonging in his heart, that we're welcome, that we're loved, that we're cherished, and that we are free from sin. From the power of sin that once dominated our life has been broken through what Jesus did by dying in our place and being buried in 3 days, rising from the grave. Through that experience of what he done, he's emancipated us from the power of sin. And then not just that, he makes us alive in God's spirit. His very own life is then given to our spirit, and he makes us alive. Right? We are alive to God to where we once were dead and asleep. And we are loved forever. And that's a powerful one. We'll mention something in the end. Loved forever, not based on our performance, not based on our clean time, not based on our ability to keep God's commandments. We're loved forever. And then, before we're ever told to do one thing in the book of Romans, we're told all of these things. Then you have what we do. 12 chapters. Think about that. It's got 16 chapters. 12 chapters first telling us what God's done, who we are, and what he says about us. And then we arrive to the part where it says what we should do. And he says, therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. And this is something unique about that. That word urge, it's like to plead with you. It's almost like to get down on your hands and knees and beg. Listen, this isn't just a suggestion here. Like this is where the Bible breaks from the program of AA, where, if it's not about your sobriety, we'll give you suggestions. And if you decide to not take it, I'm going to be here for you. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, well, I'll be right back. There's a place for that, but I'm telling you, there's a place beyond that where Paul is saying, I urge you. And then he not just urge you, like I'm demanding you do this. He's like, brothers and sisters, like we're family. Realize who you are. Realize how God sees you. And as if that's not enough, he says, in view of God's mercy, in light of all that I've said in the previous 12 chapters, now I offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. Because how you live matters. How you represent the king on the earth is important. But he's not a harsh dictatorial being. He's not like this authoritative person who's just demanding things, right? Like with an iron fist. No, he's merciful. And in light of his mercy, now offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. The things that you put in, the things that you do with it, how you use it. Think about how merciful God is. And when you experience his mercy, the things that you might once have done in your worst moments, maybe in your addiction, or maybe when you don't see yourself very highly and you interact with other people, maybe it's romantically. It's like, look, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice back to him. This is how you can be the reward for his suffering, right? And so on to the next one, Ephesians. We see the same pattern emerge. We've got what God did. It says we are blessed, right? He opens up. Before you need to do anything to be blessed, he says, hey, look, through what Jesus accomplished and being united in relationship with him, God has given you every spiritual blessing in the heavenlies. It's like our starting point is a place of blessing. And then it says we are God's masterpiece. And I heard in my spirit to say something to you. And it might be shocking, but look, you're not a piece of shit. You're not a screw up. You're not a failure. You're not just an addict or a junkie. And all those words that were spoken over you that are pretty much curses has now been broken because God says you are his masterpiece. Think about this art that we give away, right? And the painter takes all these intricate details and colors and puts it together to represent beauty and glory. And he says that now is who you are. And he's proud to showcase you. Even in the midst of your mess, the midst of your addiction, in the midst of where you're at, the way he sees you is like royalty. You are his masterpiece. And as if that's not enough, it says he's brought you close. He's brought us close to him. It's not like when you screw up, all right, go put in time out and you get your behavior together and then maybe you can approach me. He's like, no, we're now close now. And I want to walk with you. I'm here with you. And I'm present in this very moment through the thick and the thin, the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, on your best moments and your worst moments. When people are there for you, celebrating you, and when people leave you and abandon you and discard you. I am here. We are here. You're close. And as if that's not good enough, it says we are God's home. What that means is when we get born again and give our life to him, he decides to come and dwell on the inside of us. Even when it might not be a safe place for him to do just yet because of our wrong thinking. He says, I'm going to go ahead and claim you as my own and make my residence in you. And I'm good with that. And then it says we are deeply loved by God. Deeply loved. It even says that we're loved with a love that surpasses knowledge. And the only way to really know that is by the Spirit taking the uncreated love of God and making it known to you. That's how much we're loved. And now, in light of all that, there's what we do. And Paul says, I, therefore, the prisoner in the Lord, beg you to lead a life worthy of the calling to which you have been called. This is a similar thought, right? I beg you. Not that I'm wringing my hands in frustration and upset, but like, I beg you, see yourself as you truly are. The most important thing about you is what you think about God when you think about him, right? And so he's like, I beg you, like almost like with a sense of like joy and like wonder. Come on, see yourself as I see you. And then it says, lead a life worthy of the calling to which you have called. Because there is a purpose for you now. Aimless wandering can be a thing of the past. Filled with the future and hope and destiny can be a thing of the present because of what he's done. There are people in this room, I believe, that are going to start new things. You might start new meetings. You might get people into detoxes. You might start businesses. You might be, in education, school teachers. You might work in the hospitals. You have a calling and a purpose now, right? And right now you are where you are, but God sees more for you than where you're currently at. And it's because of what he's already did for you. And then the next one, this is God's gift. Right? What God says about you in Colossians. It says, we are rescued. Like we were trapped in darkness and in addiction. And he came and he rescued us. And he's forgiven us. Everything that we've ever done wrong, whether we knew it or whether we didn't, whether it was in the midst of our addiction or it wasn't, doesn't matter. It says we are forgiven. He has nothing against you now. There's nothing standing in between you and him. There's nothing in his way to have a relationship with you. He's removed every barrier and every hindrance and every obstacle that might block you from knowing him and to experience the goodness that's found in his very own being. And it says we're made complete. It speaks of a place where scarcity and lack and struggling can be a thing of the past because of what he's provided. Before we earned it and we didn't deserve it. And even adding up our best efforts, it says he makes us complete. And it says we're free from rules that don't save us. A sense of preoccupation with like keeping rules won't help. He's freed us from that. He's liberated from that. He wants us to not be thinking so much about what we should do and what we shouldn't do and receive what he's already done and believe who he says we are. And when we think differently about all of that, suddenly rules are something we just so happen to keep. not by focusing on it, because we see life differently now. We want to be responsible. We want to be dependable. We want to be counted on. We want to be able to keep a job even if we have to wake up. We might not emotionally feel the best about it, but we want to do differently, right? Because of what he's accomplished already and what he did. And he says, now as a result of that, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. And so there's this place of victory. There's this place of triumph. There's this place of hope that can be greater than your environment. It can be greater than your experience in the present, and even greater than whatever crazy cravings and urges that might come in your body. Because when you visualize how he sees you and you experience the emotions that comes with that, the joy, the celebration, the excitement, like he's thrilled to know you. He's like he's just waiting for you to wake up in the morning so that he can talk to you. Like when you think about that, it's like, whoa. And then that experience with him then helps you to rise above whatever disappointment, whatever discouragement, whatever setback you might face. And we're seeking something, meaning we're not just aimlessly letting things happen. We have purpose. We can be intentional about where we want to go. It doesn't matter if you feel in the natural trapped that no matter what you do, you're not going to get anywhere. He has provisions for you. And I'm telling you, what seems like a catch-22 on the earth, it really is an opportunity for him to open doors that you couldn't see in your own, because he wants you to trust not in your circumstances or not even in people, but in him. And when you do that, then you're like, okay, where's my answered prayer going to come from? Sure, you see what's going on in the natural, but okay, how's he going to get me into the next season? How's he going to move me forward with where he has for me? How's he going to do this? And I'm telling you, when you have this expectancy and hope, it's almost as if things around you just line up the way they're supposed to in your favor so that you can progress. Man, I would love to say more things than time permits, but I know this is true because of my own life. I came to Atlanta. I was living in a van, homeless. I didn't have a job. I just wanted to be connected to a church, to an old mentor. And I needed this to get that, and I didn't have this. But man, I'm desperate, and I'm calling on you, and I believe you're going to answer me. I walk into a place, and I get a job on the spot before I even put in the application. Do you have previous experience? Yes. Well, I told him yes. Yes, I know probably 20% of what this job has, but in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to learn, and I'm going to have a good attitude, and I'm going to be teachable. Yeah, I work long hours, and at first, I'm going through withdrawals from heroin while working a landscaping job with hardworking Hispanic good people that like go, 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 go. I'm telling you. Tacos for lunch? Yes. I'm broke. I don't got nowhere to live. Let's eat. Thank you. Fiesta, let's have tacos. True story. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Man.
Oh my God.
And I'm telling you, like, I'm sleeping in a van at night, and police are waking me up saying you can't be here. So I go here, and then they find me here. Then I go there, and then they find me there. But I'm so exhausted from working. It was almost as if like the withdrawals I was experiencing didn't really bother me as much. I felt it, right? But man, then I go to this other job, and they say, hey, we need a driver at this company. Can you drive? And I was like, yeah. You got a license? He's like, yeah. And so I upgrade to a better job, right? And that's what got me to Atlanta. And so you might not always know when the answer is going to come, and it might seem like you're in a hopeless circumstance. But if you can connect with him and what he's capable of, I'm telling you, he has solutions that you currently can't put two and two together. And when you overthink it, and when you get preoccupied with how to get out of this situation, when you don't know where you're going to go, you end up making rash decisions because you think it'll be better here. And you don't realize when you go there, there's problems here that you didn't see in the moment when you were running from these problems. And then now it's like you keep facing challenges, right? And so you got to get to the place where you can be settled where you're at while moving forward to where he has for you. And don't get discouraged in the process if things aren't working out the way you think they should. Or if things work out for other people in ways you think they shouldn't. You got to connect with him. And I'm telling you, there's solutions that he has. Like, part of me is glad I didn't show up in a sober living. Part of me is sad that I didn't show up in a sober living, right? But the blessing of me not having go to sober livings is that I was like, God, you're going to open up this for me. It was lonely, and I don't recommend being lonely. And I'm not saying leave your program, please. You hear what I'm saying? I'm saying like stay. But I guess what I'm saying is there's parts of my journey that convinced me that he is able to provide solutions at the right time if I just look for it. And it will find me, and I can be at rest, and I can show up on time, and I can have a good attitude to the people that are around me in authority and leaders, even when they're not having a bad day. I don't have to take nothing personal. Just stay in my lane, stay focused on what I'm supposed to, and keep moving forward. And now, in moving forward with the next message, or the passage. So, again, we see a connection. There's God's grace, and there's an experience of his kingdom, right? They're connected. And it says, Jesus Christ, the faithful witness, the first to rise from the dead, the ruler of the kings of the earth, has loved us and freed us from our sins by his blood, and has made us a kingdom. Man, if the CEO of Chick-fil-A did something, we would feel significant about it, right? If the president of the United States did something, it would heighten this sense of like, wow, he did something for us, right? But this is saying Jesus Christ, the faithful witness, the first to rise from the dead, and the ruler of the kings of the earth, the Lion who reigns as a king, carries the heart of a lamb who redeems. And he's liberated us, and he's given us a future and hope in relationship with him. And we're now part of his kingdom. So, as you'll see, the Apostle Paul says, as you know, we dealt with each one of you like a father with his children, urging you, here's that word again, and encouraging you, and pleading with you that you lead a life worthy of God, who calls you into his own kingdom and glory. And I know what it was like when my life was unmanageable, when I wasn't able to keep my promises and people stayed away from me, right? And after experiencing all of that and just letting him speak to me through his word, not focusing on a word for my crisis, not focusing on a word for my behavior, but just focusing on who he is and what he says I am and can do, I realized that I can lead a life. I can lead a life. I can lead my life. Before I'm worried about leading other people, you can be an influence and serve, but man, you can lead a life worthy of God who calls you into his own kingdom and glory. And right now, there are people in the room who, if you walk in to certain spaces and you see a leader and you connect with them, you'll feel a sense of significance. You'll feel a sense of value, as if man, they can help you and they can offer something to you. And what I'm telling you is what you're capable of is being that same people to others. Or when people see you and they connect with you, they feel uplifted. They feel like they can accomplish things they didn't previously think that they could. They see that there is a future of sobriety. There is promises coming true. There is new opportunities that they never would have thought. Kind of Paula, she's like, oh, play small and you might discount yourself in those spaces. And he says, no, you can step into those because he calls you into his own kingdom and glory. And then lastly, in this last slide, the Apostle Paul said, for I am convinced that nothing in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. I mean, you got to be convinced. You got to be persuaded. You got to be assured of what you got to do? No. Of what other people got to do? No. Of what he's already done and who he says you are. Someone who's loved by him. That nothing can separate you from all the love of God. And this is why when we get up here, we don't often address behavior. Now, we will at times, and I will reference certain things, or I might imply certain things, but it's almost always after you hear what he says about you and hear what he's done for you and understand who he says you are. Because then it will make sense. Then we're not trying to control you. We're not trying to get you to manage your behavior. And this has gotten me to a place where what keeps me sober is being persuaded by his love. All right, it's the lamb that was slain might allow me to be the reward of his suffering. And that's what I want. And that's when my relationship with him becomes bigger than my recovery, as important as that is. He has more for me than just a life of sobriety. He's called me to be able to lead a life worthy of him because he's called me into his kingdom in glory. And he's capable of doing great things through your life to impact the world. But he first wants you to be convinced. And this last scripture, it says, for the love of Christ urges us on. And y'all see that it keeps showing up? What's the tone? Think about that. And what you've heard, what is the tone behind that? I beg you, I urge you. What tone do you hear when you hear that? Mercy, compassion, understanding, faith. Like he has faith in you because of what he's accomplished already and who he says you are. The tone of his urging you comes from a place of joy and gladness and compassion for you. And because we are convinced that one has died for all, so that all who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who died and was raised for him. This is what keeps me sober. This is what keeps me moving forward. This is what keeps me believing that I can not just survive day by day, but I can thrive and flourish everywhere I go. Because I've experienced his ability to set me free from addiction. And then it made me wonder, what other things can you change in my life? What other things can I step into? How able might I be to help other people? He doesn't just want to leave you in your brokenness and you be preoccupied with helping other people so that you don't have to deal with what's going on in here. Of course, you serve and you help other people, and it's meaningful. But what I'm saying is he wants to bring great healing, great restoration, and great joy on the inside of you so that then you'll step into all that he's called you to do. And that's the heart for us. I think there are people here who are capable of more than you know. And there have been things that were spoken about you that you hated it and it brought great pain and it hurts you, but part of you agrees with it, because you see your track record and how you've lived up to what's been said and you've discounted yourself out from certain things. Man, he is able to break that off of you. In fact, I believe that he already has. He just needs us to see that it's broken so that we can step into the freedom that he's made available for us. It's powerful. You've seen all of what I've shared. There are people who once were angry towards God, maybe because people who represented him didn't do so in a way that's connected with what I just said. And if that's you, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you had to go through that. I'm sorry that you had to be confused because people you look to who were supposed to love God and show the way did the very opposite. And it's caused great confusion because you want a relationship with him, but then you're thinking, if he's like that, I don't want anything to do with it. And it's put you in an inner state of restlessness. I want to tell you that he's good and he's better than you think. And he's sorry for what you had to go through. And he wants you to know that's not him. He didn't do that to you. He loves you. He went to a great price to bring and purchase freedom for you. And he thinks the world of you and what you're capable of as a son and a daughter. And their last thing I'll say is, if now's the time where you say, you know what, I've been on the fence with this relationship with Jesus. Maybe I didn't know if he was real, or I didn't know if I'm ready to give all of my life to him. Now's the time. Because it's the love of Christ that leads us to no longer live for ourselves. Think about that. Not the wrath of God, not the judgment of God, not even the commands of God. It's the love of Christ that leads us to no longer live for ourselves, but for him. And so tonight, I hope that your picture of God has been changed. Yes, he expects things of you, but he wants you to know and experience his love first so that you can step into who he's called you to be and what plans he has for you to accomplish, because they flow together and they're connected. So the Lion who reigns as a king carries the heart of a lamb who redeems. And his heart is towards you, and he is for you, and he's not withholding any good thing from you, but it's found in reference to him and trust in him, not just with your sobriety, but with all your life, because he's worthy of your trust. He is able to open the scroll of God and reveal the one true nature and character of that God, where no one else is worthy. And so the time of weeping and bitterness can now end. And you can step into a new chapter, you can step into a new story, and you can step into a new year with a new picture of God, with a hope in the future, and knowing that you're going to make it. And with that, I'll close. We do have a few people here. If you want prayer, they can come up, or you can connect with them. They've got lanyards on. Freedom is here. A new season is here. And the good God is for you. That's what keeps me sober. The goodness of God. Thank you.
Very good, very good.